Valid.
So although most people favor the bill and the bill does not violate anyone's basic human rights, it will not be passed for many years, if at all, nor will any similar bill. Those people who would
Okay,
be
so
at
stop there for a second. So I read this and I'm like, this sounds ridiculous. Like, my reaction is like, this sounds ridiculous. Most people favor it. Like, why isn't this going to happen? And I want to know
Yeah.
more. Like, tell me more. Like, why? I have issue with this, but continue on.
I see. Um, Nor will any similar bill. Those people who would be adversely affected were it to become law are very influential. So this shows that if this country is a democracy at all, it is not a well-functioning one.
All right. So what does that second sentence mean in relation to like how do you process that second sentence?
Um,
Like, what does that mean?
so I get, I'm assuming that it's kind of saying these people um, that that like have a lot of power or influential, like don't want this to pass, don't want this law to
Yeah.
be passed.
So essentially, like those that would be like, well, most people want this bill. Most the people that would be like hurt by it are influential, and I'm like, screw them. Like, so
Yeah.
already I'm thinking like, the very influential people must be controlling it, and I'm mad. All right, but continue on. So then we say this shows that if this country is a democracy at all, it is not a well-functioning one. That's our conclusion, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, my like gut reaction is like, yeah, I agree with this, but technically flawed, right?
Yeah.
And so our conclusion is if this country is a democracy, it is not well functioning. And we think that because like most people want something, but like smaller people have more of a, it appears that smaller people have more of a say.
Yeah.
Okay, so what kind of question is this?
So this is a principle justify,
All right, so
uh,
I call these strengthen questions.
strengthen questions.
So it's like, which of the, I read this as like, which of the following premises, if true, most helps to strengthen the columnist argument? Like just
Got
sort
it.
of one fewer question type to remember. And so I'm looking for something that will show that this, if this is a democracy, it's not a well-functioning one. So what's your prediction here of what would strengthen this?
Um, I guess something about like if a bill I guess I was trying to do the contrapositive of like what was said.
So like if a bill is favored by most people and is not passed for many years, then it can't be a well-functioning democracy. Yeah.
But those people who would be adversely affected were to become law, if whatever, like that sentence right there, that middle second sentence, um that's kind of where I was like had a hiccup because I wasn't sure if to include that in the contrapositive or not.
You don't have to include everything.
Oh, I see.
Like, right, we just need one point or one fact to get us there. So we can just think about it as a loose prediction.
Okay.
But let's say, okay, so let's read A and see what we think here. So what does A say?
Okay. So in a well-functioning democracy, any bill that would benefit most people will be passed into law within a few years if it does not violate anyone's basic human rights.
All right, so how would you diagram A?
Okay, so if a bill does not violate anyone's basic human rights, so we just have to abbreviate that.
Wait, any bill that would in a well democracy, any bill that would benefit most people, we pass into law.
If
Yes, so if a bill would benefit most people, so benefit most people. Well, actually, I didn't diagram it that way. I thought of it more so of the sense like if it is a well-functioning democracy, then it will pass bills that benefit most people as long as it doesn't like hurt human rights. Like I read that as an and, right? Like, so if it doesn't do this, then it's not a well-functioning democracy. So I actually like A, right?
Okay.
Because we have this going on, right?
But wouldn't you start with the if first? Like the if not.
So this one's where it's confusing because I take this as like in a well democracy, like as long as it meets this condition, so if it does not violate anyone's basic human rights and it would benefit most people. Like we have to have both of those things.
Oh,
in
I see what you're
order-
saying.
Yeah.
I see. So,
So
but
it's kind of like just an extra condition on it. And so do we meet both of those things in our stimulus? So like, do we have
but it will be passed into law if it does not violate any basic human rights and most people favor it, but it doesn't mention that.
Yeah, okay, but in our stimulus, we say, although most people favor a bill and it does not violate any human rights.
So we do have that.
Saying is that if it's a well-functioning democracy, any bill that does this will be passed into law.
Oh,
Well,
I
in
get.
our
I see what you're saying.
stimulus, we have those two conditions, but it's not passed into law. So can we be a well-functioning democracy? No.
No.
So I like A, but let's continue on.
Okay. If a democracy is well functioning, if a democracy is well functioning, then any bill that is opposed by influential people but favored by most other people will eventually pass into law.
So this one's close, but what makes this one wrong?
It needs the other part of it because it says favored by most people will eventually pass into law, but it's missing the
Not actually.
no.
Nope. That what makes this one wrong is
Oh,
will eventually pass into law. We don't know if this one will eventually pass into law. We just know it will not be passed for many years. So this could still be a well-functioning democracy up here. Because we have the other part. We have like if it we have then any bill that is opposed by influential people. Yep, we got that. Is it favored by most people? Yep. But we don't know if it will eventually pass into law or not. So we can't guarantee that this is not a well-functioning democracy. So that's a hard question or a
and
hard answer.
just really quick. So if the country is a democracy at all, it is not a well, and being a democracy at all is the top part of our stimulus, right? Although most people favor the bill.
This part right here.
Yeah, I forget what those abbreviations.
That's our conclusion. Like if it's a democracy,
Oh
then
yeah.
functioning.
So yeah, when it says like if it's a democracy at all, what democracy mean is like short for the top part of our stimulus, right? Most people favor the bill, and the bill does not violate anyone's basic human rights.
Well, that's just what's happening in this country. So they're assuming because that's happening, we're not a democracy, but we have no reason to think that without a principle saying that if this happens, then like in a democracy, if that happened, it would be passed into bill. But since it's not happening, we're not well functioning because in a well functioning democracy, it would have been passed into the law. So we're trying to prove here, why are we not a well functioning one?
Because most people favoring it, and it doesn't violate human rights, and it's not passed.
Right. Where B, if this were true, all of this is good. We don't need to include every part of the stimulus for it to work. But up to this part is good, but we don't know if it will eventually pass into law or not. This is saying in a well functioning democracy, it eventually will pass into law.
I see.
We don't know if this eventually will happen or not, so it's not as strong as A, or it's not as good as A.
I gotcha. Okay. All right, makes sense.
All right, what about C?
So in a well-functioning democracy, a bill that is favored by most people will become law within a few years only if those people who oppose it are not very influential.
All right, so how would you diagram C?
But most people will become law within a few years. So I guess like bill favored by most people becomes law. It's just long within a few years, like that whole thing. And then the
only if those who oppose it are not very
or not very influential. Yeah.
So if they are influential,
then
it will not pass within law. Yeah, that does nothing to show this. This actually, we would be a well-functioning democracy then, right? Like, because we're saying like in a democracy, so in a well-functioning democracy, if a bill passes or a bill that is favored by most people will become law, so only if people are not influential. Well, in our situation, they actually are influential, which is the equivalent of that. So it's not.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
All right. Well, what about D?
So any bill passed into law in a well-functioning democracy will be favored by most people and be consistent with individuals' basic human rights. I think this is the one that I picked. But
because you're a good person and you're like, yeah, this is true, but not logical.
Yeah, I think because it says any, right? Like, any is that it's kind of
any bill passed into law in a well-functioning, because this is saying like any bill that's actually passed into law will have these traits. Well, our bill isn't passed.
So it's outside of scope?
Yeah, right? Because it's saying like, this is saying like any bill that is passed into law in a well-functioning will do these two things. We're talking about something that has not been passed. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So this, yeah, awesome. All right, what about B?
Okay, so a bill that most people favor will be passed promptly into law in a well-functioning democracy if the bill does not violate anyone's basic human rights.
So I really like this one too. So I like A and C, or A and E, I'm sorry. So I like I actually really, really, really like E. So I'm like, okay, I clearly must have missed something in A. And I did. And the word I missed was benefit. We don't know if this bill will benefit most people. We just know that most people favor the bill. So we don't have one of our conditions that we need. And I totally missed it the first time.
I see.
Being completely transparent, like.
Yeah. I think when I saw E, it was like a weird, sufficient, necessary, like different than what.
A bill that most people favor will be passed promptly, and I like this, promptly into law in a well-functioning democracy if the bill does not violate any human rights. So we're saying, so if the bill does not violate human rights, which is true, right? It doesn't, then the bill will be passed promptly. If it's a well-functioning democracy, then the bill will be passed promptly. Well, this was not passed promptly, so it's not a well-functioning democracy.
Our stimulus, right?
Yep. Because it says that it will not be passed for many years, and I would say that's the equivalent of not promptly.
So it's doing the contrapositive, which will then lead you to the right answer.
Yes. I bet this was a level 5 question.
Yeah.